Welcome back to Season 2, Episode 3. We are talking about everything outside the box. So that's from the walls out. So when you think about a storage conversion, mostly you think about the building, the condition of it, and doing all the work inside to outfit this for climate-controlled self-storage. But there's a lot that goes on outside of the building.
You want to make it an attractive building.
Exactly.
So, how do we do that? What are we doing to the outside to make this thing, this rough diamond, sparkle?
Exactly. And sometimes we want to improve the outside to a certain degree, and sometimes the town or the jurisdiction says, no, you really need to improve it.
Sometimes, we don't even get the option. They're like, you got to.
Yeah. Here's a 540-page book called the UDO of exactly what you have to do for this exact building.
That's a lot of reading.
There's some historic districts. There's some overlay districts. It gets real nitty-gritty down to the actual color, if you're painting the building, to the color, the tones, earth tones, no bright colors. Submit all your colors. It can get that intense. Other areas, other certain jurisdictions, it doesn't get that crazy. But you just never know. We try to feel them out during permitting, but, it's their rules, and we just have to follow them.
Yeah, that's it. We're just playing with it. So I guess we'll just start off usually, I would say, during our walk or our first site visit, we get an idea of what we're going to do to the outside. Either we're going to paint it or let's look at the condition of the outside first and then what we're going to do from there.
Yeah.
Right? And then we kind of get a little bit of guidance from the AHJ, this is what you can do or this is what you need to do.
Yeah, usually it's pretty vague the first time around. They'll say certain things like you need to adhere to, you can't add, 50% more impervious square footage. Basically means if you lay more asphalt or even more gravel, that you have to do stormwater retention and stormwater calculations, which basically means when it rains, there's a calculation about how much water is running off your property and how to divert it and certain areas to collect it if you go over a certain amount. So it does get that intense. So they just give you certain guidelines, and sometimes when we read these guidelines, honestly, it's like another language, and there's literal calculations of all certain things and certain ages of the building. When the building was added on a couple times, it kind of blurs the lines, and that's usually when we get that feeling, that's when it's time to engage a civil engineer.
Correct.
Sometimes we can get away with our traditional architect or a landscape architect. Those costs tend to be lower. But when you're dealing with a jurisdiction that requires all these things, typically you can't get away with using a traditional architect or a landscape architect. Usually you actually have a full-blown civil engineer come out, do a survey, and engineer all these kinds of things.
Yeah. And they're looking at trees, sidewalks. It's a whole...
It's literally everything. So sizes of trees, tree credits. If you take any trees down, you usually have to put back more. Sometimes they make you put more anyway. The color and style of your fence, whether you have to install vinyl slats in your fence, your gates, your approaches, your exits out of the parking lot. Hopefully you're not dealing with a DOT road, because then you have to go to DOT and get approval from them if you're trying to add or remove anything. So, and then there's something called a street yard. It's just like your front yard, except this is the area between the street and the parking lot, like that small grass strip.
Yeah.
There's certain street yard restrictions that we have to deal with. Sometimes they make you add berms and increase the elevation, so your sight line is kind of broken up. Sometimes they just allow you to just plant a ton of bushes and trees. So you just never really know what you're going to get into until you start designing and following all their criteria.
Yeah, so I would say, Kernersville's are probably one of the most stringent ones.
Yeah, so far Kernersville has been the most strict.
What would you say was one of our easier ones?
Gastonia. Gastonia was really easy, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had almost no comments on the exterior. Yeah,
Would you do what you want?
Yeah. No, we poured new concrete and new asphalt, and the zoning approval and all that stuff came from the desk, and they said you're good to go. They never even took a look. The guy's like, I drive by all the time. I know what you're doing over there, and no problem. So you just never know what you're gonna get. Burlington was right in the middle. We were planning on adding like a handicap ramp. So there was some stuff that we did there. And, actually Burlington, there was a time and point where they told us that the whole RV and boat storage area, they told us that we had to do all new blacktop.
Oh.
Yeah. So.
Wow, that's a lot.
So they told us, yeah, hey, you got to do all new blacktop. And we did a Google search of all of the commercial lots nearby.
Yeah.
And we're like, well, none of these have blacktop. So why are they making us do blacktop? Well, the idea is that it was a more like warehouse industrial kind of area. And I think they wanted it to look nicer because it's right next to downtown. And I understand that, right? Like we definitely knew where they were coming from. But the cost difference between graveling this parking lot versus asphalting was nearly $330,000. The difference, right? Because it was like only like 30 or 40 grand.
Yeah.
Actually, all in, it was probably about 60 grand for the gravel with the certain things we did, and it was like 400,000 for the asphalt.
Oh.
So, we build a rapport with them, and we kind of pointed that out, like, hey, like no one else in the area has asphalt. Additionally, one of the worst parking lot materials you can use as a self-storage operator is actually asphalt.
Really?
Yeah. So
Why is that?
You typically want concrete or gravel. And the reason being, if you ever seen somebody's like boat on an asphalt parking lot, like their boat trailer on an asphalt parking lot, if you look at the wheels, the wheels are starting to sink in.
Yeah.
And basically, because it's sitting, and then when you have the heat from the sun come and heat up the asphalt, well, it settles it.
Yep.
So asphalt is not a good idea. Once it settles, it opens up the pores essentially, and then when the water goes in there and freezes overnight, it cracks it. So it's a maintenance nightmare to store items on top of a blacktop. It's not a good idea. The only way you can kind of get away with it, and you'll see this around if you look at storage, you have to have a canopy overhang. So that takes all the heat.
That makes sense.
It absorbs all the sun's solar rays, and then the blacktop can withstand it. But there's actually a community right next to our house, and it says there's a sign that says if the outside temperature is 70 degrees, then the blacktop temperature is about 110. Okay. If the outside temperature is 90, the blacktop temperature could get up to 140 degrees. Yeah. So they put that sign for your dogs. Because your dog's paws.
It's a dog sign.
It's for the dogs, but it's the same premise, right? Yeah. If you have a stationary object that weighs as much as a boat or an RV on blacktop, and you have a sun combined with it, you're bound to just have a maintenance nightmare after 2 or 3 years.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's funny that so thinking of Burlington, just talking about that was another outside the box situation where we had to deal with the railroad.
Yes.
I totally forgot about that until we were just thinking about that now. Yep. Like, oh yeah, what's another outside the box? Sometimes we have to deal with.
Yeah, I mean,
railroads.
The railroad.
That was a nightmare.
That was really, the hardest part about that is just two totally conflicting reports from both sides. So we had a surveying company come out and they pulled surveys back from 1920 about where our property line was. Yep. And to see, nowadays we use something called AutoCAD, which is, very high-tech drawing and kind of mapping. Yeah. Back then they did hand drawings. So to actually be able to see the survey from it was like 1928 or something like that, where it was just like Doug's warehouse, and then just a line like 74 feet out is the railroad. Like now it's all like there's a bunch of different dimensions and all different aspects and telephone poles and all that kind of stuff. But there was like Doug's warehouse, a tree, and the railroad track was like 74 feet away, something like that. And so, but then there's newer maps. So our surveyor did his due diligence. He looked at like every map since, for 100 years back. And there's like 8 or 10 iterations. So he was extremely confident that where our fence line was, we were within our property line. We were within 10 or 15 feet actually inside. Well, the railroad track disagreed because they have been around since 1840. And the railroad, and the funny part was the railroad track shifted about 10 feet. Yeah. So their space that they're allotted, it's an easement. Their easement was 25 foot on from the center
line of the
of the
track.
original track, not the
Yeah, that's
existing
right.
track. So even with that, though, our survey said even with that information, we are still good to do this. And then the railroad was like, I don't know. So we went back and forth, and they actually started exchanging emails with each other, with us CC'd on. And we decided that we would come to a compromise, and we'd move the fence in another 5 foot, and they both felt comfortable with that. And that's how we were able to move forward.
Yeah.
I mean, we just went to go install the fence, and we had no idea that we were about to go
There's a can of worms.
into the depths. And I think, overall it didn't really matter too much. It was just like, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, yeah, tomorrow we install a fence.
Yeah.
Hold up. No, you don't. And we got to do it right, because we don't want to move the fence later.
No.
Yeah.
But another thing that we have to look at is signage, right? That's another thing that is outside the box, that is one of those things that you don't think you're going to need a permit for, but it requires
Absolutely.
the town and the AHJ to review and make sure, like, hey, this is what we're going with.
Yeah, just like your HVAC contractor pulls their own permit, electrical, they pull their permit. Sometimes they could tack onto ours, but almost always we have a sign contractor, and the sign contractor pulls their own permit. So part of their scope of work is to dive into the county's UDO, basically the rule book, find out what the allowable square footage is, and the placement.
Can it be illuminated? Can it not
exactly.
be?
Yeah. Can we have a weather sign? Can we put the temperature on it? Like how many businesses' names can we put on it?
Yeah.
All that kind of stuff.
It's crazy.
Yeah, offset from the road. So, if you do not do that and you install a sign, you will definitely have to take it down. If you just install what you want, you're almost certain you're going to have to take it down. So that's why we have to do the due diligence and stuff. And actually, I don't know if you saw the email we got last night, but
for K-ville?
For Kernersville, yeah. We had an adjustment on the sign that was their UDO, like I said, is 540 pages, and there was a small thing that was overlooked, and our sign got rejected.
No!
Yep. Which is, it happens, but these are the things that it's just like we thought we had the perfect plan, and we thought we had, all the rules figured out.
Yeah.
But, there's always like caveats in each rule. Well, if you have a sidewalk in the area, then you need 6 foot away. If you have a building within 20 linear foot, well, then you have to evenly space. Like there's so many rules that, you have to pick which one. And so it was some comments, and we're going to figure it out. But, it's just another thing that we just contend with, and it's really not a big deal because there's always a solution.
Always a solution. Yes.
So another outside the box thing is grading.
Yes.
Is that like when your teacher gives you an A+ or B-, or no? That's not what that one
that's
is.
the curvature. That is we want to keep water away from our building, so it's just the watershed away from our building. We want to make sure we have good grade all around where we're flowing water away from the foundation.
That's right.
And either into some type of storm drain system or V-ditch or swells, they call it. Just moving the water around the property. But yeah, we don't want any type of water intrusion. So that's always like one of those things that we got to keep an eye on.
Yeah,
because we don't want people's stuff getting damaged. So.
Yeah, I think also like building practices now are very different. Like people back in the day didn't know that you're supposed to actually, the foundation is supposed to be above the grade, of the lot by X amount, and like to really think about water movement around the property. I think it was really in the 70s when people started paying attention to that kind of stuff. I mean, I think before that you just got lucky, or you didn't. You just kind of built what was there. But now, there's a whole business on earth moving, like literally civil contractors that move dirt. Yeah. So whenever you prep a site, it's not like it used to be. It's like, okay, we're pulling we're grading, we're pulling all the top grass off, we're adding new dirt or whatever, compacting dirt. It's just very different than it used to be. And the buildings we buy, they were built in a long time ago, the 20s, the 40s, that kind of stuff. Grading was
not a thing.
Yes, grading was not even a thought.
Yeah, so I mean, there's other things that we can do, like French drains, where you're connecting your drain or your gutter system to some type of outlet.
Yeah.
Putting some type of culverts along the foundation. I mean, there's just so many different techniques, but like we just want to keep that in mind when we're walking the property, when we're looking at it. Like, okay, is this going to be a problem down the road?
Yeah, I agree, and I think the cost of it is way more than like you would typically think, because you have to, like, you could hire a civil contractor, or sometimes we basically have our site superintendents rent equipment, grading equipment, skid steers, that kind of stuff. And both of them have operated heavy machinery for many years.
Yeah.
I know Dave was in the Air Force.
He was
operating.
A dirt boy, yeah. So I mean, they're like, that's their kids in the sandbox. Just give them a machine and like, hey, move some dirt around. They love that.
Yeah,
they're like,
John does too. Yeah, I mean, I know John spent days and days on the machines over in Gastonia to help us out, save some costs there. John's been doing it for 20, 30 years also. So, I mean, we're fortunate that we have that experience, and we just rent the equipment from Sunbelt, United, A to Z. It just shows up on a trailer, and, we'd rent it for 6 to 7 days, and then we send it back. Like, we're not moving dirt that often because we don't do new construction. We're kind of just fixing areas that are not the best. So it makes sense for us to not have to maintain this equipment, pay the finance charge on this very expensive equipment. Like, it just makes sense for us where we're at to just rent the equipment.
Yeah, I agreed.
And we always have a equipment rental line item in our budget for exact things like that. And we scope the project and see how much grading we have to do typically. And, it's always nice also to have an asphalt or a hard surface, it's called, line item, where we grade it. And then if you do hard surface on top of it, that helps the water really shed away. If you just leave it dirt, it kind of retains the water.
And usually that hard surface, we got sidewalks.
Yeah.
Or
sidewalks,
aprons, or driveway aprons that we got to go into.
Yeah,
I mean, Kernersville really is the one project that is just like all encompassing.
Yeah, we have all the
everything,
all of the opportunities to do grading, sidewalks, fencing details, asphalt, planter boxes, gravel. We're doing it all there. Trees. Yeah. So the sidewalk detail for Kernersville, we actually pulled that off their UDO. They had their own sidewalk detail, which is nice, to get their detail and be like, okay, we know if we build a sidewalk like this, then it's going to be approved. And that was one pro of having a 540-page UDO. But yeah, I mean, tell me about the trees in Kernersville. What kind of fun experience have you had with that so far?
Just calculating all the trees that are needed. Obviously, just finding the right landscaper that is going to be able to. So first, I just called nurseries. Like, hey, do you know anyone that's going to be able to supply it? What is like
240 trees?
40 trees.
Like bushes, trees.
Shrubs, all that
kind of stuff.
And then we kind of looked at, okay, what type of irrigation we're going to need, because these are going to have to be alive.
Yes.
By the time we do CO.
Yeah, we have to keep them alive.
So that's always a big pain point. So we kind of looked at the schedule and worked backwards there. Figured out, like, okay, do we need a drip irrigation system to keep this thing going? And then really, I mean, we got lucky. We did find from a nursery, we got a contact for a landscaper, and we're working with them. And nothing has been planted yet. Yeah, but soon to be. They're coming out. I mean, they're going to start moving dirt around, getting the landscaping right, and so that's really what's going on in Kernersville with the trees. I don't know much more about trees yet. We did take a huge pecan tree down, so that's
we did have to remove
big credit. We're gonna have to reevaluate at some point.
Yeah,
probably sooner than later.
That thing was a hazard.
It was so big, it didn't make any sense.
Yeah,
because it was going to run right into our sidewalk
and our fence.
And this is before we.
That's how big it was.
Unfortunately, this was before we had the city come out and give us the blessing, like, yeah, you don't need a sidewalk down here. It's like, oh, we just took down this pecan tree.
Yeah.
Thank you. Great. Now I got to figure out how to, probably going to need 30 to 40 trees just for this one, to replace this one pecan tree. So it's a nightmare. It's fun.
So parking.
You
wouldn't think that parking is that big of a deal with self-storage.
Yeah, you really, because we're just looking, hey, unload, load.
Yeah.
Be on your way. We run out.
Yeah, so when it's actually one of the first things that we have to look at when we're even thinking about buying the building, believe it or not, because, one of the tricky things is however many, really depends on the jurisdiction, but typically it's like for every 30 to 50 storage units you have, you need one parking space. So, and we could play with that, right? Because we could have like 10 5x5s, or we can have like 3 10x20s, whatever the math adds up to. But so we can play with that a little bit, but we definitely have to make sure that there's sufficient parking. If there's not, then when we go to do the change of use, they're going to be like, no, you don't have enough parking. You can't do self-storage here.
Yeah, it's a weird little thing.
Yeah, it's just something you would never think of, that like it's like could be a deal breaker. It's like obviously there's ways around, like we can think of ways around it, but I mean it is one of the first big things, and that is definitely an outside the box thing where it's like outside the building you're just talking about parking, and it's like it really is something that we definitely have to pay attention to.
Well, it's really that change of use, right? Like you're looking at these buildings that already have parking spots established, and you're like, okay, we'll be fine. We'll be fine. And then they're like, oh, once you do that change of use, now you might have to think about your parking all over again, and the amount that they actually currently have may not be sufficient.
Exactly.
And you may have to add.
Yeah.
That's where it's like, oh,
dang
it.
Because like each use has a different requirement for parking. So, if you have like a retail place, well, its parking is going to be pretty intense. They're going to require a lot of parking for a retail space. Luckily, self-storage is not one that requires that much.
Yeah.
But like industrial warehouse is not that much because you have a couple employees, but you have 18-wheelers coming in and out. You don't really have customers coming. Yeah. So it's one of those things where we basically just try to do our best, and then there's ADA requirements where not only like if it's tight, like sometimes we need extra wide spaces for ADA. Mm-hmm. So we also have to accommodate all that stuff. For those of you who don't know, ADA is American Disability Act.
That's it.
So access is super important for disabled people, and we have to accommodate them.
Yeah, and then like Kernersville, this whole thing, they actually require like a bike, God, what was it? Like a bike rack area.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that.
Like, hey, we need at least a spot for a bike. I'm like, what the heck?
There's like room all over the building for a bicycle.
I'm like, yeah, lean it up against the building. Yeah. What do you mean?
Yeah, that's.
What else we got? Like, once again, we buy these buildings from way back when.
Yep.
And so they're huge transformers.
Yeah, they weren't
just eyesores.
They weren't good at making them very efficient.
No.
These things are massive.
And
massive.
We don't like those.
No. Burlington was a perfect example. We knew that transformer was extremely unsightly, not very efficient, and it was the size of like a short school bus. It was massive. It took us 13 months to get it removed.
Yeah.
When we buy the building, the power's coming from that old transformer. But then we pull new service, or we tag onto a different existing service, because a lot of times these things were added on. So sometimes there's smaller transformers somewhere on the property that we could pull off of. Gaston is a perfect example of that as well. So we bypassed that giant transformer, and basically we were open for 2 months before they finally finished their work order to get that giant transformer removed. But like you said, they're just total eyesores. They look crazy. Yeah. It looks like a crazy lab equipment setup. It's
evil layer.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like this is how Frankenstein gets.
Yeah.
It's electricity. Yeah.
But sometimes the existing transformers that are on the property are not enough to power our buildings. So that's where it comes into a calculation, basically based on our electrical engineer and Duke Energy. Like if some other service or transformer is going to be sufficient enough, and Kernersville, luckily, we do have enough transformers, other transformers, newer transformers on site existing, that we can demo the existing massive transformer, just like Burlington. It's a crazy eyesore. I think it's even bigger than Burlington's, but it's
massive.
Yeah, it's massive, and it's right there, right next to our building, and it does not look good. And remember when we were getting lead times for new transformers from Duke Energy?
Yes,
and this is before Western North Carolina got wiped out by that storm. So they were quoting us like possibly, I think it was
6 to 8 months.
6 to 8 months. For a new transformer. So that's why it's really important for us to kind of think about if we can utilize the existing transformers that aren't the eyesores and make that work.
Yeah, I like it. Anything else outside the box?
Windows and storefront. Yes.
So obviously we want to make this building look attractive.
Yeah.
And what is more attractive than windows? Glass.
Yeah.
Class.
And storefront aluminum and, the thicker IGU glass.
Yeah.
It's energy efficient and it looks great. The only thing is, sometimes the city has a say on the color of your actual aluminum storefront.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like anodized is your typical like silver or grayish look.
Yep.
But that's not always what they want.
Yep. Sometimes they want to see a classic bronze.
A dark bronze.
Or a dark bronze.
Who knows?
Looks like black, and you're like, okay, wait a minute.
Yeah. Are you sure? Yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think a lot of what we do is we're buying these old buildings and we want to make them look great, right? Like if you see brand new construction for climate controlled self-storage, a lot of times they have the storefront look and they have the fake doors there. Like Lexington's a perfect example of where we cut in a sizable storefront area and we put in the fake hallway and the storage door, so it looks like the storage. I think it looks great.
Yeah, I mean the building tells a story before you even get there. You're
exactly.
Like, hey, what is that? I know what that building is because I can see the storage doors from the outside.
Yes. Yeah, it does look great.
And I love it.
Yeah. And it's nice to have the little accent. Like we're still making them look fantastic, but we're not putting in like 700 lineal foot of storefront.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, it's just we do these accent walls, and we're doing a similar one in Kernersville, and a similar one actually in Florence as well. Luckily, the storefront is existing in Florence, but
yes.
Yeah, I think a storefront is a great way to add, curb appeal and value to the property.
Appeal,
efficiency.
Lighting, I mean, it's easy for our security system to be linked up to it. I mean,
Yep.
So that wraps up Outside the Box, Season 2, Episode 3. Thanks for watching.